Allison. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Allison.
Let's see, my sobriety date is, I can tell you a little bit about me since. My sobriety date is May 13th, 2006. I have a home group. It is the Principals Group of Raleigh. It just changed and I just moved back. So I know that it's in a church off of New Hope Road. And if you ask me about it, I can give you directions, but I can't tell you the address. And I have a sponsor, and she has a sponsor who I know some of you know, Sarah Nemechek, and she has a sponsor, and I also sponsor, and you know, I'm a member in good standing, so there you go. I can tell you a little bit like what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. But before I do, I just want to let you know that I have a little quirk that I'm totally okay with, but I'm just letting you know that I have it. I tend to cry a lot. It has nothing to do with, you know, how emotional I am, or, you know, I'm not trying to manipulate you. None of that. Someone once told me that it's because no one heard me as a child, and it's still really upsetting me. So I just wanted to let you know that I probably will get choked up a lot as I'm telling my story, and it's fine. You guys, all the men in the room, it's fine. But I can tell you a little bit like what I was like. I grew up with the military. My dad was career Army, and it was, honestly, it was really cool because I got to travel around all the time. I grew up overseas. I got exposed to a lot of really cool things. It also meant that I moved every 2 years, at least. I didn't stay in the same school all the time. I made new friends, or didn't make new friends. Or, I made friends and then I moved. Or, and then I only had, like, my family with me to support me, and, they're my family. They beat me up. And, I have a little brother and an older sister. They beat me up. So I can't say that, I wouldn't have the same issues if I had stayed in the same town my entire life. I would probably have the same social anxiety issues that I have now if I really had just grown up in the same town. But I can say that probably doing that exacerbated a little bit. I felt very isolated a lot. I felt like I never knew what to do. I would become, very self-enclosed, and I would have my own thoughts and world going on, and then not really know what anyone else is doing, and speak up at a really inappropriate time, or try to jump in and at a really inappropriate time, and just not really know how to interact with people. And sometimes was better than others. Elementary school sometimes was really hard, and sometimes it was really good. And that also gave me the ability to, which helped me out in sobriety a bit. It gave me the ability to accept where I am as I'm there. Really enjoy the place that I'm in. Really enjoy the friendship that I am, and kind of expect it to end eventually. In sobriety, you tend to have friends in early sobriety, and then either you outgrow them or they outgrow you, or whoever, and you just be grateful for that time that you had, but it's time to move on. And that has helped me a lot, and that has also hurt me a lot, because it's really easy just to let people move on from your life. But I will say that, like I said, I grew up overseas, and I was exposed a lot to drinking and wine. I did drink wine when I was a kid, like in kindergarten. I could tell the difference between, a Bordeaux and a Cabernet, or I thought I did. I knew the words, and I knew the difference between a dry wine and a wet wine, or a sweet wine, and I knew what I liked, and which is really weird, I know, but at a very young age, I already knew that, that was really important to me, and I wanted that lifestyle. I wanted that lifestyle of hanging out for hours on end at a restaurant, talking with a couple of glasses or a couple of bottles of wine in front of you. As I aged, I would read the cocktail menus, and I was really excited about one day being able to try some of these cocktails. And when I was in college, eventually, one of my goals in life, the way that I knew I was going to be an adult, was whenever I could have my own bar. I have my own cocktail shaker, and I can invite people over. And this was before Mad Men, but I probably wanted that. So at a young age, I knew that alcohol was really important, and I wanted that lifestyle. And I knew that as an adult, as someone who is self-sufficient, who could take care of herself, who wasn't dependent on other people, and was accepted into life and society, alcohol was going to be a big part of that. Was going to be the reason for it even. And the self-sufficiency was an important thing to me even then. I always felt like a really weak person. I always felt like I couldn't do anything on my own, and that everyone else had a handle on things, and I was not the person to go hiking, or I'm not an athletic person. I was picked on a lot by my brother and sister and by my friends, and I felt sorry for myself all the time. I felt like I wasn't the favorite. I probably had the best childhood in the world, but something about me just felt awful about myself, and I wondered why no one was taking care of me, and whenever they did, I was resentful because they did, and that began at a very, very young age too. So, let's see. So all these little quirks, and the character defects and character traits, they're not really things that make me an alcoholic, but they made me go looking for alcohol as a cure for them. I'm pretty sure I had this disease from the very start, because Lord knows I was maladjusted to life. So anyway, we eventually moved back to the States. My dad got out of the Army. Even as a civilian, I went to 3 high schools in 5 years, and finally moved down to Chapel Hill and graduated from high school there. And then I went to college, and you would think that I got out of the house and was able to be finally live out all my fantasies and have friends and everything, and that didn't actually happen until my junior year. I always had these expectations too. High school was going to be like Archie Comics, and I was going to have juggle a bunch of boyfriends, or Sweet Valley High, if anyone my age has ever read that. In college, it was going to be the same thing. I was constantly waiting to arrive. And that didn't happen until I went to go study abroad. And in my junior year of college, and it was back in Europe, and I have arrived. I'm finally that I know who I am. I'm that American girl who loves to travel, who's not the typical American girl. And even to this day, I find that I'm more comfortable in a foreign country than I am over here. And at this point, I've lived in America longer than I've lived overseas, so go figure. But yeah, I all of a sudden I felt comfortable with myself again, and I got a British boyfriend named Magnus. I didn't understand a word he said, but he was British. And I knew whatever he said was attractive. So And I dated him for 3 months, and after that, after he broke up with me, I obsessed about that guy for 2 years. And I started to drink a lot, like I finally had people I could hang out with. I was able to close down a bar. I was able to, go out to clubs, and I could dance with people, and I had someone, even if I didn't have Magnus there, I had, another friend that I could rely on to hang out with and to go out with, and I wasn't awkward. I was just, I belonged. And, in the big book, Bill Wilson talks about whenever he joins the Army and there's war fever, and he talks about how he arrived. Then later on, he talks about, whenever in the 20s, whenever the stock market was raging and he was making lots of money, he had a lot of fair weather friends. And that's kind of where I was at. That was my golden age of drinking. That's what I look back on and think that, that was wonderful. All my expectations were finally met. But the problem was that even then, let's think, 3, 6, 9 months into my drinking, my drinking started to slowly catch up with me. I noticed whenever I needed to go out at least once a week, and by go out, I mean like just get wasted. Now I didn't make that connection, but I thought that I needed to go out to a club and let loose once a week. And the rest of the time I would sit in the square and drink a vodka and relax and read a book and be all European and maintain and drink, but I needed to get wasted at least once a week. And that progressed really, really quickly. I started drinking when I was 20, when I was 21. I started studying abroad when I was 21, and I got sober when I was 23. So my drinking progressed really, really quickly. Then I left, and I went back to Burlington, where my college was, and it was going back to isolation. I didn't have any friends. I needed to finish one more year of school, and I could not even do that. I started working at a restaurant, and I would hang out with the guys at the restaurant, and all these guys would they would sleep, they would not really get an apartment, but they would move from couch to couch and house to house, and they would just make just enough money to be able to drink or to pay for whatever else they were doing. But I was hanging out with those guys, the guys who, I don't know what their deal was, if they had any kind of disease, but it was a very different situation from what I was used to. And I wasn't hanging out with anyone at school, and I wasn't able to make it to class. Sometimes I would sleep in, and I would wake up and just, this is how my day went. I would wake up and look at the clock and realize I had overslept. And I would just pull the covers over my head, and even though I wasn't tired anymore, I would force myself to go back to sleep because I could not face whatever was out there, Then I would wake up again, and I would see my half-drunk Heineken next to my bed. It was warm, and so I would drink that. And then I would think, okay, well, I can make it to my 12 o'clock class, And so I would get dressed. I would drive to my 12 o'clock class, sit there in the parking lot, or maybe even walk up to the building and go, I can't even handle this, and walk back and go back to my apartment and watch Law and Order marathons on TNT for hours. Law and Order marathons, I'm telling you, that's the way to go. And just, and at the end of every episode, they would there was like overlap of episodes, you know, and so you couldn't just like go to the end of it and just, you know, end it there, because I kept on expecting to do that. I kept on meaning to do it. It was like my drinking, you know, I kept on meaning to end it whenever it finished, but then there was overlap, and they started, and I have to keep going. And then it would end up being, I don't know, 6 o'clock at night, and I would, you know, on the nights that I didn't have to work, I would get dressed up, and I would put on some makeup, and I would put on something nice, and prepare like that ritual to go to the bar. Because I hadn't talked to anyone all day, and I was alone with my thoughts all day. And I needed to talk to someone. And half the time it wasn't even about the drinking. Like, I could go and buy a 6-pack and drink it all at home, or I could buy a bottle of wine, super cheap wine, and drink it by myself at home. But I needed to talk to someone. And the only way to do that was for me to drink, because I could not talk to anyone sober. So I would go to the bar and I would hang out and, you know, probably buy some people a couple of drinks so that they could catch up with me. So I wasn't drunk by myself. I was the designated driver most of the time because I had a car. And that, yeah. And that probably wasn't the smartest thing, considering that, like, for a couple months there, I had vomit stains on both sides of my car. You know, that's like that I never bothered to clean up, but you know, sometimes I was driving and I would pull over and I would get sick. Sometimes I was so drunk that I let someone else drive my car, and I was sitting in the passenger seat and I would get sick and I would throw up out of my car on that side. And I never cleaned that off. I put myself in a lot of, I was one of the drunks that would, I mean, constantly, this was a very constant thing with me, was that I would get drunk, I would go to the bathroom, throw up, and then, you know, once I got the spins, and then come back and start drinking again. Maybe eat a few saltines, maybe eat a burger or something. But that's how I maintained myself. And then, you know, and then maybe I would take a day off and after that and not drink. But like the times in between these heavy binges came closer and closer and closer together, and I needed less and less time to recuperate from them. So eventually, you know, my mom started to catch on that something was going on, and you know, maybe my car gave it away, I don't know, but so she started to harass me about it, and finally, whenever I was put on academic probation for the second time in 1 year, on my senior year, and I withdrew from school the spring semester of my senior year. She let me come home and live with her as long as, you know, I went to go see an alcohol counselor. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff that came up in between those times. You know, like I went up to go see my dad, and I got drunk off of some of his alcohol that he had hidden away, and it was in a weird town in Pennsylvania. I didn't really know anyone. It was a Sunday night, and I needed to go party. I needed to go talk to someone, you know. And so I found my stepmother's car, and we didn't have the best relationship. So like the fact that I found her car keys, found her car keys by going into their bedroom while they were sleeping and doing an army crawl across their bedroom floor until I found her purse and I found her keys and I went back out. But I really did. I did an army crawl. So that was, anytime I think about drinking again, I think about that. And I got her car keys, and I drove around, and I called my mom because I got lost and she knew the town. And I don't know what party I was looking for in a strange town in a really residential area on a Sunday night, but I was looking. And so finally I finally found the house again. I pulled back in and scraped up the entire side of her car along the driveway, or along the garage door. I made it back safely, but and then my mom called the house because my phone was dead, and she wanted to make sure I made it back safely, and she's flipping out. And so she called the house, and my stepmother answers, and I blame everything on my mom. Oh, she's crazy. Are you kidding me? And so I didn't do that much stuff. Like, in the grand scheme of things, I'm sure you guys have done some much worse things. But God, I felt horrible after that. I felt so bad, and I had no idea what was wrong with me. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was depressed. I just dropped out of school at that point, and I think my dad came home from work at halfway, like at noon the next day, and woke me up and took me out to lunch, and just asked me what was going on. And I was like, I don't know. I just dropped out of school. Like, that's the first time I told him. And I had no idea. And I'm pretty sure looking back on it, that was the first time I prayed. And I don't know what I prayed, but that's the first time I prayed to God just to, fix me or something. But anyway, that was my spring break. And I moved back home with my mom, and the rules were that I had to go to an alcohol counselor. That's what she wanted me to do. And so I went to the alcohol counselor, and they came up with some more rules for me to live with my mom. And they were to go to AA every day, to be home by, I think, 10 o'clock at night every night, not drink and drive. I was still allowed to drink, but not drink and drive. You see where this is going. It's good. And, and I think that's about it. I mean, some pretty simple things. Although I think even today, being home by 10 o'clock that's just stupid to me. But, and I almost followed these rules. I really thought in my head that I did follow these rules. It took me a couple years to realize that I didn't, but I tried. And I only drank. Okay, I drove around drunk a lot, actually, and I maybe made it home at midnight. But I did go to meetings, right? And not every night. Some nights I would go to the library and just and read. I didn't go to the bar, but I didn't go to a meeting, so I went to the library and just hang out for that hour. I don't know what the thought was there, but. And sometimes I would go to a meeting, and then I would go to the bar right afterwards, or whatever it was. But I did it all, and I met some really nice people who stayed sober, and I know them now. But I did start to feel like I was kind of on a fence. I could relate to what some of what AA was saying. I could relate to the jokes, all the jokes that we tell about our character defects, and how we make fun of each other, and all that stuff. I could really relate to those, but I wasn't connecting. I couldn't make a choice, and I didn't want to make a choice. I didn't feel like I was actually trying to stop drinking, and so maybe it's not really a problem. But at the same time, I kept on going back to all the guys that I knew in Burlington and telling them what was going on, and they're like, you're not an alcoholic, that's stupid. Or I would talk to my bartender, and he would look at me and he goes, I know alcoholics. You're not an alcoholic. Well, the problem was that I'm a lightweight. And I look like I'm just a heavy drinker. I really thought for a long time that it was just I was finally just acting my age. And that's what it probably looked like. I'm acting my age as a 21-year-old or a 23-year-old girl who's in college, just out of college, I don't know. But like, I thought I was just acting my age, and by all appearances, I was. But I knew every time, for some reason, whenever these people would tell me, like, no, you're not alcoholic, that's stupid, I would think, like, no, there's something to this. There's something going on, because I knew that there was something about this that I could not control, you know, like, I was very aware of what it felt like whenever last call came. And, you know, I have a full drink in front of me, so I don't order another one. You know, I'm good. Last call came, I'm good. I'm feeling really good. And then that drink just keeps on going lower and lower and lower and lower. And as it goes lower, and I know I can't order another one, and it's past 2 o'clock, and this is North Carolina, so I can't, you know, go to the store and buy any more alcohol. This is it for the night. My irritability and my discomfort just increased as that glass became emptier. And so by the time it was empty, and I just like slurped up all that melted ice water, you know, I was just miserable, and I wanted some way to keep the party going, and I couldn't figure it out. So like I knew, I was aware of this feeling. I knew that something was off. And so, but I couldn't make up my mind. I couldn't do it. And so finally what happened was, like, after a month of this, and by we, I mean my mom, decided that I was going to go to rehab, because I couldn't do it myself. You know, after a month of going to AA, nothing was happening. So I went to rehab in Mount Airy, and you know, like I said, I'm glossing over a lot of really boring stories. My brother joined the Marines during this time, and my last drink was during his graduation at Paris Island. And you know, my mom ended up doing everything right. She was talking a lot to people in Al-Anon at that time. She was talking a lot to the alcohol counselor at that time. And she did everything right as far as like letting me hang my own neck or noose, whatever it is. And so, but at that, my last drunk ended with her finding me at the bar and me ordering her a shot. And her telling me that she wanted to bash my face into the bar. That was what I had, you know, brought her to. You know, she told me that I was a leech, which was true. You know, like I wasn't a force of destruction with the people in my lives. I just sucked the energy out of them. And that didn't have a whole lot to do with drinking. That had to do with me. You know, just me being so just unable to support myself and unable to take care of myself. Constantly questioning myself and feeling sorry for myself all the time. That all had to do with me. The drinking just made me annoying. So I went to rehab, and actually I had a good time at rehab. It was fun. I went to a rehab in Mount Airy, and it was in a farmhouse, and it was at the foot of the mountains, and you know, Middlebury was nearby, or not Middlebury, what is it? Andy, Mayberry, thank you, Chuck. And you know, there were dogs and there were horses, and it was like going to camp. It was so much fun, and we went to class every day, and I took notes, and you know, I like to do that. I can show how smart I am, and but at the same time, like I couldn't do the most basic thing. I couldn't make my bed. I couldn't wake up in the morning. This is a recurring theme for me. I can't wake up in the morning generally. It's still something that I struggle with. I would do my homework, and then I wouldn't turn it in, just because I just couldn't do it. And so I was talking to my counselor one day, and I was just explaining to her, like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know. I can't do it. I just can't do it on my own. And she goes, you can't, but God can. And that was a weird thing for someone to say to me. Like, no one had ever said that to me before. Any time, and I've said this a lot, I can't do it. I can't do it. I don't know what to do. I can't do it. I've said this a lot throughout my entire life. But everyone had always told me, I don't know if this is a military thing or not, but everyone had always told me that, you can do anything that you set your mind to it. Just do it. Stop thinking about it, just do it. And that would just, I know I can't do it. I can't do anything on my own. I can't wake up in the morning. And so the fact that someone acknowledged that and said, you're right. You can't do anything. But God can. That was the first time someone had both validated, I'm not crazy. What you feel is actually a real thing. But they also said, a solution. If you rely on God, then you will be able to do it. That was a whole new thing for me. And I can't say that awesome, I got this now. But that was a small spiritual experience for me. And my getting sober is a series of small spiritual experiences that just kind of rolled over on top of each other. It snowballed. The other thing that happened at the rehab, I constantly thought, I'm really young, maybe there's something to this, maybe. But I'm gonna, I'm really young, I'm gonna miss out on a lot. Or as I started to go along a little bit further, I thought, okay, I can do this for now, I can get my life in order. I know I can't go to school on my own, if I'm still drinking. I know that, I've tried it, I can't do it. I know that I can't wake up in the morning, I can't keep a job by myself if I'm still drinking. I'm gonna get my life in order, I'm gonna go back to school, I'm gonna graduate, I'm gonna get a little bit of money, I'm gonna get a little bit of stability, and then maybe I'll go start drinking again. I'm young enough, maybe I can do that. So I had a lot of twisted stuff going on in my head. I didn't make any kind of connections as far, it didn't resonate. I didn't feel like an alcoholic. I knew that my life was unmanageable. That was pretty clear. And I knew that I was powerless over drinking. I was powerless over alcohol. Like I said, I knew I was very aware of the way that alcohol affected me. That once I started drinking, I could not stop. I didn't know how, and I didn't want to, and I never tried. So I knew those two things, but I did not feel like I was an alcoholic. It did not click with me. That name did not fit. And so one of two things happened. We were taking a class when I was at rehab on all the diseases that happen associated with alcohol, and I realized that I had actually been hospitalized, the institutions, death, all that stuff that they promised, that actually had happened to me. I thought nothing was wrong, I had never been arrested, but I was hospitalized for a week while I was when I was studying abroad, and I don't know what happened because all the doctors were Polish, they didn't speak English, but I knew that I was on the surgery ward for a week, hooked up to an IV, not able to eat. My appendix was inflamed. It was given an ultrasound every day because they were afraid that my appendix would burst and they would have to rush me into surgery because my stomach hurt. And I realized that was, when I was taking this class, I realized it was probably gastrointestinalitis. I don't know what that is. Apparently it's a thing. It happens when you're drinking, and it hurts. It hurt a lot. So So like this disease had already affected me as a 23-year-old who had only been drinking heavily for 2 years. I already was starting to get the shakes. You know, my skin was starting to turn yellow. I was starting to get rosacea. I had been hospitalized. So that was one thing that just made it click. The other thing with the whole like identifying as an alcoholic thing, I realized this a couple years ago, probably like 2 or 3 years ago, that my dad probably had a lot to do with it. My dad, when I was 16, my parents split up, and it was super dramatic. It was not pleasant. Parents still won't talk to each other after 15 years. It's ridiculous. But one of the things that we did was we had an intervention with my dad. Now this was before I really knew what alcoholism was. I didn't know if my dad had it. This was a way for me to go and say, like, why are you leaving? Why are you acting this way? These are all the things that you do that makes, you know, some people would say that I was calling him a terrible father, and these are the reasons why. Like, I don't know. That's what happened. I'm sure that's what he heard. And really what happened was we sat there for an hour or 2 or 3, I don't know, and he held my hand, just like squeezed my hand, and just kept on saying, I don't feel like I'm an alcoholic. That doesn't click. That doesn't feel right. You know, and he'd also say that, you know, if I do go to recovery, if I do go to AA, then I'm going to have that stigma with me for the rest of my life. You know, if everyone's going to see me as an alcoholic, and that'll affect me for the rest of my life. And I just kept on thinking, like, who cares? My God, just go. If it doesn't work, try it. Something new, like something in our situation, our family, something is not working. Try something else. You know, I didn't know if rehab was the answer. I didn't know if he was really an alcoholic. I just wanted him to just try it. And he wouldn't even do that. And he still drinks now, and that's fine. But I think that whenever I was getting sober and I didn't feel like I was an alcoholic, I just kept on thinking back to that, like, why not just try it? Like, something's not working here. I cannot take this myself. I can't handle this anymore. If I continue drinking, I'm gonna go live with the guys who go from couch to couch, and I can't do that. I can't live that way. And so I stuck it out. You know, I tried it. That gave me a little bit of willingness to be able to just to do what I was told and to sit on my hands and not leave. So when I was at rehab, the counselor suggested, because I have no self-discipline, she suggested that I go live at a halfway house for a little bit more structure. And so I moved here to the Bethany house, a little bit down the way. And it's, for those of you who don't know, it's a 6-month program. And I lived here for 11 months because I needed a lot of help. And that was probably the best thing that I've ever done in recovery. Well, I can't say that. I've done a lot of things that have worked out really well, but I got a lot while I was here. You know, it was humbling. I was numb half the time from, like, you know, just brain cells weren't registering right yet. You know, I was in a fog. It took me 6 months before I realized that I was in a halfway house. I worked at Little Dino's, and, you know, standing over the grease, I got a lot of zits. And, you know, and I learned how, very, very slowly, I learned how to take care of myself. I learned how to pay rent. I learned how to be responsible and be accountable. I mean, they would follow behind me with the chores. And, you know, I would wipe down the counters if I had like a kitchen cleanup or something. And, you know, Barbara would come in behind me and like look at the dishwasher handle and see some crumbs and just like give me this look. You know, like I had to go back and clean all of it because she found some crumbs on the dishwasher handle. Which is ridiculous, but at the same time, it taught me I am accountable for what I'm doing. I can't just half-ass whatever I'm doing, which is what I normally do. You know, I learned how to actually show up 10 minutes early to where I'm supposed to be. I learned how to take responsibility for something whenever I don't do it, and to make sure I actually do it. You know, I almost got kicked out of there twice. Not because I was doing anything wrong, well, not because I was doing anything destructive, but because I didn't finish my chores in time. You know, I would have a series of write-ups where I didn't do my chores in time in 1 week, or this was a good one. I would stay up reading all night and not make it to meditation in the morning. I would sleep in, and so I would get written up, and not because like I sat up and read all night. That's my excuse. And so instead, the 2 times that I was almost kicked out, you know, I was actually restricted from reading books for like 2 weeks each time. Most of the times whenever that happens with ladies in the house, they take away TV privileges or phone privileges. I never called anyone. I still isolated then. I never watched TV. I would bury myself in a book, which is really convenient for like whenever you don't want to talk to anyone, you really want to isolate, reading is the way to go. You know, and so like, yeah, they took away my reading privileges. So you know, after about a year of living in Southern Pines, I was able to, well, while I was still living here, I applied to go to a different school. And originally I was trying to go back to the school that I had dropped out of, and it was just, there's so much crazy with that. I had no idea where to go. There was just so much to do, and I was whirling myself in a whirlwind, and, you know, being overly dramatic about it. And this was right around the same time when, you know, I was in the halfway house for about 9 months, and so we all know 9 months is a great time to really chafe at our restrictions. And so it was also a time when, for some reason, everyone in that house was going crazy. You know, like they were not following the rules. Not only were they not following the rules, my rules, but they, like, a lot of them were going out, and, you know, they were going out and like just some really good friends were going out in just like the worst possible way, living in a park, you know, getting in accidents, taking people with them from the houses. Just, I mean, we would have a watch. Like someone suggested at one point that we get like a map of like, where have you seen this person today? And like put a little push pin in. It was that kind of thing. And it was a lot to take. And so coincidentally, that's when I was taking my 3rd step. And one day I was able to go out and leave the halfway house and go out with my sponsor and help her garden and go to the pool and pray and have a little bit of peace. And after that, everything, you know, and after praying the 3rd step prayer for a really long time, I was able to, I was able to get a little bit of clarity with everything. I was able to get a little bit of peace with all the crazy people that were going crazy around me. I was able to accept it whenever people weren't following the rules. I was able to accept that I was still in the halfway house, and I was able to not focus so much on going back to my old school, but start to apply to my new one, to this new one. And everything just kind of fell into place after that. It wasn't so hard. I didn't feel like I was banging my head up against a wall. Like, there were things that would come up and I would do them. It wasn't so stressful. So it's amazing what you do when you follow God's will. I've been trying, you try to get back to that place of like early recovery. It sounds weird, but sometimes when that rawness and that energy of early recovery is really, I look back on it and I almost wish for that sometimes. Almost. But so sobriety, we only have a little bit of time, so I'll talk about what I'm like now. Sobriety has given me a lot. I was able to go back to school. I was able to do it, to be financially self-supporting while I did that, which meant a lot to me as someone who felt like she couldn't do anything by herself. That's something that was a new experience for me. I am able to hold a job today. I've been able to hold a job. I got involved with, while I was in Raleigh, where I was going to school, I got involved with NICCPA, which is the North Carolina Conference of Young People in AA. And man, that really just threw me into the program. It really did. It taught me traditions. It taught me how to focus on something that is more important than myself. Focus on someone. It taught me how to focus on someone else. When I'm feeling like, all the thoughts are getting in there, I learned how to, do some service, to look around me and go, okay, so who in this meeting is more awkward than I am? Who looks like they are really uncomfortable right now? Because I guarantee you, whenever you walk into a meeting, there is someone else there who is more uncomfortable than you are. And so, like, whenever I'm feeling uncomfortable, whenever I feel like the social anxiety stuff or any kind of anxiety stuff come on, that's what I do. I focus on other people. And that's what AA and NICCPA taught me how to do. I was able to be the chair of the advisory council for that, which was a really great thing, and it was a really great thing to lower my ego a little bit. Because I realized it was great whenever you're voted in and you're at the conference and everyone finds out that you're the chair, and everyone you have 300 people all clapping and cheering for you, and then you get home and you realize that your job is to make sure that everyone else does their job. This is not the most exciting thing in the world, and no one thanks you for it, and no one. It's not about you. It's about making sure that thing happens. That the show goes on, that you're following the traditions, that you're focusing on someone else. All of those things. It's not about me and my ego. I was only. This is another ego thing. It made me really sad. This was a 5-year commitment, and I was only able to keep it for 3 years. And the reason for that was because I applied to go back to grad school, and I moved to Delaware. And so because I moved out of state, I was not able to keep that commitment. And so I was only chair for, not even to the first conference. I didn't even get to help out to completion the first conference. And so, that was sad for me. And it also, I actually did go back to that conference, and, someone else went up to the podium, and someone else was chair, and I had to let that go because it wasn't about me. I'm very proud of what I did in the very short amount of time that I was there, but I really did not do anything. But I moved up to Delaware. I learned, which was really hard. I learned how to focus all of this AA energy that I have, all of this service energy and attitude of focusing on other people and helping out a cause that's more important to me. I couldn't do that with AA anymore. The women weren't around me. I couldn't have the fellowship that I'm used to. I didn't have the time to focus all of that energy in AA. Like I did what I could. I had a home group. I sponsored people. I started to sponsor people more there than I did in North Carolina. But I couldn't do what I had been taught to do in AA, and it really gnawed at me. But you know what happened was that I was able to focus all of that energy into my school. I started to realize that I'm a part of a community that's not AA, but you know, I belong to my school community. And I really focused a lot on that. I was able to organize a trip back to Poland, where I first started drinking. I confronted a lot of ghosts. I was able to, this took a year and a half, I was able to complete an organization of a trip, which took a lot of energy. I was able to use all these traditions outside of AA, and to really have some of those promises fulfilled for me, you know, to be a contributing member of society. And so now that's what I do. I work for local government, which, you know, some of you may argue is not contributing to society. But I do. I believe that I try my hardest to contribute. And I really try to, right now I'm trying to find that balance between, you know, still being involved with AA and still being involved in my community. You know, sometimes I feel like we start out and we make that connection with our sponsor, we make our connection with our fellowship, we make our connection with our home group, and then it builds. We make our connection with intergroup and GSO and Nikki Paw, and you know, our community, as we get sober, it builds. And we're responsible for all of that. You know, we're responsible for our families, for our relationships, our communities, our neighborhoods, and that's a really big gift. So I know you guys are antsing to get out of here, but I just want to thank you for inviting me to speak and allowing me to come back. So thank you.
Thank you.